And I'll just introduce myself. I'm the chairman of the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence in Illinois. And the reason I'm on this call is I'm looking for discussion that would lead to common ground when we're looking for the balance between protecting gun ownership rights and constitutional rights versus increasing public safety. We have to be able to do both.
Okay.
I'll back up and say I'm definitely pro gun safety. I don't know anyone who isn't really, but it's kind of a unique position because I'm absolutely a new activist on this issue after Newtown, and I think you'll find a lot of moms in particular, a lot of parents in general, have been pushed to act on it rather than just having an opinion as I did for years before. I am married to a gun owner who also supports many, if not most, of the proposals on the table. Steve is jumping in here with some labels that I absolutely refute, because the fact that I'm working on making it a safer culture and a safer country for my kid and for myself does not make me an anti-gunner. I'm a huge proponent of the Constitution, and I reject this notion that regulation is infringement. I reject it outright, wholesale.
Okay, so let's get clear here on gun safety. Is your idea, both of you, of gun safety more gun regulation and control?
Well, Dwayne, before we start jumping around on particular questions, can you just introduce yourself and kind of how you come to this issue and what you'd like to get out of this conversation?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. We keep freezing the connection. I'm getting bits and pieces of what you're saying, but I'm catching on. I'm 52. First name is Dwayne. I am a college student earning a master's degree in business. I have also been a business owner several times in my life, and I'm politically active in my community. I have openly supported candidates to support our Second Amendment rights, and have worked and been a fundraiser for the campaigns of John McCain, Sarah Palin, and Ron Paul here nationally. I also am a lifetime NRA member with a lifetime membership, and I am a staunch supporter of our Second Amendment rights, and I am not for increasing any more regulations and gun control because we're not currently enforcing the ones that we have right now.
Okay, so I think I've spoken with several people on that side of the question, and understand where you're coming from, Dwayne. And so Colette and I are saying that we understand that we need to find the balance between gun owner rights and Second Amendment rights, and ideas for reducing deaths and injuries involving firearms. So somehow we have to figure out how to reduce deaths and injuries from firearms without infringing on individual rights. Is that something that you would be interested in discussing?
I'm only getting bits and pieces of what you said, but if I understand you correctly, we need to reduce deaths and injuries from firearms. I do agree, and as an NRA member, I do support knowledge of guns and people getting background training in guns, which is one of the reasons that I support the NRA's position of getting a concealed weapons permit, because there's too many people out there who have guns who don't understand that their responsibility doesn't stop just because the bullet that they use missed the target. However, I should also like to say that if anybody has been paying attention, that we have had our highest rates of mass shootings and mass murders and criminal activity in parts of the country that have gun-free zones.
Well, the whole country has gun-free zones.
The Clackamas Mall shooter, for instance, went into a gun-free zone in a gun-free mall, and he thought that he had free reign to the place. But the Aurora, Colorado shooter particularly chose his particular theater because it was a gun-free zone, and he just stated that day before yesterday in court that he knew there was going to be no one to stop him. The Clackamas Mall shooter actually chose that particular mall because you weren't allowed to bring firearms into the mall. However, he was confronted by a legal, law-abiding citizen with a concealed weapons permit who had a bead drawn down on him, who swore that they were not going to take him alive, and he took his own life when he was confronted with someone who could stop him. And unfortunately, he got to shoot 2 victims first. But look at some of the most dangerous cities that we have in the country also have some of the toughest and most restrictive gun laws. And we can start with Chicago.
Well, we always start with Chicago. I'm getting a little tired of this Chicago canard, to be honest with you, because all I need is a car, right? Have you seen the recently released survey of where the crime guns found in Chicago come from? Every surrounding state. So it's a false argument, and I think we should not do this Chicago thing. It's tedious at this point.
Okay, how will we, where are those guns coming from in surrounding states? Because I know the gun show loophole is one that is being used as a source of information, and frankly, 0.7%, 0.7% of the guns used in crimes actually come from gun show loopholes where there is gun background checks.
I'm not talking about a loophole, Dwayne. I'm talking about I can get in my car in the middle of the loop in Chicago. I can go to Indiana, I can go anywhere and buy a gun legally about as easy as buying a cheeseburger. And there's something wrong with that. So we don't need a gun show loophole. We're practically giving guns away in this country. Loophole is one of the most absurd terms I've ever heard. It's a fatal
Well,
gap.
if there is something wrong with that, there is something wrong with that state that's not using the national, the NICS system to do a background check for those gun applicants. Last year, there were 80,000 people who failed to go ahead and qualify for a gun purchase, but only 43 of them were prosecuted.
Dwayne, 6.6 million guns changed hands in this country legally here with no background check. None whatsoever. 6.6 million. That is a number that the NRA cannot get past, that responsible gun owners like yourself and myself cannot be okay with.
Where are you getting your figures from?
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second, Colette and Dwayne. I've been involved in this issue for 20 years, and I'm really I've participated in a lot of these types of discussions where statistics and facts and figures get thrown at each other, and I don't think any of us do this for a living and can claim to have complete knowledge of all of the facts and figures and statistics, and we can all find statistics to support our arguments. Okay, that's been going on for years. But Dwayne, what I'm interested in doing is advancing the conversation beyond this talking at each other and actually listening to each other. And if I heard you correctly, you mentioned that you supported the NRA position for concealed carry everywhere in the country, and linking that to firearm safety education. So, did I hear you correctly when you said that you would be fine with requiring a certain amount of gun safety education to go along with a concealed carry permit?
Well, as part of a concealed carry permit program, yes, you do have to participate in firearm safety education. I don't know what it's like in the states where you guys are at, but I'm in Arizona. And at least an 8-hour class about your rights, legalities, and responsibilities are explained in an 8-hour class before you can get a concealed carry permit. And then when you do get your approved certificate for a concealed carry permit, usually you go out shooting with a certified firearms instructor in the state, or you go to your local police department and you participate on a shooting range where your instructors are police officers who are testing you for accuracy, knowledge, and safety of your weapon.
Okay. I think we can agree with that. I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. It's not consistent in every state, like you said, but that's the type of thing we're looking for. What can we do to make sure that these people who own guns are using them responsibly and helping to reduce deaths and injuries involving firearms? So let's continue that conversation. Is there anything else that would be agreeable to go along with a permit to carry a concealed weapon?
Okay, I missed part of your question because between you guys and me, the video and the audio keeps freezing up. But are you asking me what agreement we can reach with gun owners as far as safety and permits to carry a concealed weapon? What new regulations should be implied?
Yes, similar to the education class you mentioned.
I'm sorry if you guys have a difficult time hearing me. We have a really poor connection this time.
We can hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. You guys keep freezing for like up to a minute at a time, and I can't tell which one of you is speaking, so it must be on my end here in the valley. I apologize.
You might have more luck if you turn off the camera and use just audio.
Good idea.
I can try that. Let's see what happens.
Bet it'll be smoother.
And any better?
Well, we can always hear you. Can you hear us better?
No, it's making no difference whatsoever.
Okay.
In fact, let me go ahead and turn my camera back on, so at least then you can tell when I'm speaking.
Give it a whirl.
Don't you just love the modern technology? So, Tim, could you repeat what you were just saying again a couple of minutes ago about firearms owners and an agreement you would like to see reached?
Yeah, agreement around concealed carry and what sort of common sense restrictions we can attach to concealed carry laws that would reduce deaths and injuries from firearms. For example, more training, more safety training for the permit holder. I think that's agreeable.
Oh, I can agree to that. I do agree to that, and I support that completely. Currently, right now, in the 50 states that we have, in the last 20 years, 40 states have joined up with the original 15 that had castle doctrine laws. Arizona is an open carry state, and not all of them are, but those 40 states that have permitted weapons holders to actually concealed carry in their states, violent crime in those states has gone down by 38%, and the knowledge of how to handle guns and gun responsibility is up by almost 40%.
Well,
No, I
there are
think
lots of.
that the NRA's program of encouraging people to be knowledgeable about guns and become certified properly in the handling of guns is working.
Well,
make a
go ahead,
very
Kelly.
clear point, though, if I can jump in. The NRA, before they had kind of psychotic break with reality in 1979, are the institution, the most respected, most venerable institution on the planet for gun safety and training. It's what they made their name on. It's why they were invented to begin with. It is what they did, and they did it beautifully. When they radicalized in the 1970s, it's a function of a few things happening, but you can basically follow the money and understand that as gun ownership drove down, the hunting culture, the sporting culture is by all standards shrinking. They knew that to survive as a thriving industry, they were going to have to open up new markets. And I know this just from having a dad who was a gun guy and not a groupthink guy at all, who tore up his membership that was a free gift to him in 1982. He saw the writing on the wall then and saw it ever since. And he passed away a few years ago, but I know where he would stand on this. When this organization that represents less than 5% of gun owners in this country has so much influence and so much power, we need to look at the money. We need to look at the profit center here, because 80 million people own guns, 4.5 million of them belong to the NRA, and something like 1 million of those were freebie memberships or are dead people still on the rolls. So there's a problem that this very small representative group of gun owners has such a disproportionate voice in this conversation. When 84% of NRA members surveyed favor background checks, and the NRA is on record publicly against expanded background checks, there is a big problem.
Do you know why the NRA is against public expanded background checks? Because we actually have the ACLU has said that they will actually fight any attempt to put mentally ill people and criminals who have been convicted of a crime into a national database. I support that. If it's not going to include people who are not supposed to have a gun in the first place, all you're going to have is a list of legal gun owners, and the 80 million people, Colette, that you said that have guns, I see that as 80 million people decided that they weren't going to lose it yesterday and going out shooting people.
Well, good for them, you know. I understand what the situation is.
You know why? You know that the NRA is motivated by more than that.
Well, so is everybody. You know, we are all motivated by money. You know, look, did you think that Representative Salazar in Colorado was motivated by money when he said women are too stupid to handle firearms in self-defense, and that Dianne Feinstein out in California said that that having a cartridge that will hold 15 rounds or more means it's legal to hunt humans? No, it's not legal to hunt humans.
It's just easy. Making it easier.
Well, it's also easy to beat people to death with hammers as well, and last year most people were beaten to death with a hammer than were shot by a weapon.
Wayne,
there was an incident just this morning where this lady had some burglar who was stalking her, broke into her house, busted out a window, and she was on the phone with 911, and she had an LCP 380. And the guy went through her house, broke into her window with a bat and came after her, and while she was on the phone with the police, the guy kicked in the door to her bedroom, and she went ahead and shot him in self-defense. Now, the media never does any of these. All they want to say is how terrible that the gun owners are, and they have a lot of people food, but they have a lot of responsibility in this as well, for misinformation as well.
Wayne, I applaud any woman, any man, any person, any parent who has a gun at home and is in the awful position of ever having to use it to defend their family, to defend their kids, you know, not necessarily to defend their big screen TV. I don't think taking a life is necessarily appropriate for that, but it's you know, there are a lot of people who have common sense. We get that. There are a lot of people. If you came into my house with bad intentions toward my kid, I'd shoot you and then I'd feed you to my dog. That's how I feel about it. So this is not an issue.
I would do the same.
And I think most people would agree with us. I think most people would. So there is so much common ground that it does not make sense to pull out canards and straw men and false arguments. Because the fact of the matter is, we agree that there is a codified historical right to gun ownership in this country. And no one is talking about taking that away. So to advance the argument by virtue of pools kill more people and cars kill more people is absolutely absurdist logic, and I resent it because it divides more than it unites. Fact of the matter is...
Okay, so let's re-ask the question.
It's not about hunting.
What can we do? What can we do to reduce the deaths and injuries related to firearms in this country? I think we all agree it's about 30,000 a year, and half of those are suicides. What can we do to reduce deaths and injuries involving firearms while still respecting the rights of
someone with a
individuals?
suicide who wants to use a gun to commit suicide. If they want to really commit suicide, they're going to do it anyway.
So there's nothing we can do to reduce suicides with guns?
Excuse me?
Are you saying that there's nothing we can do to reduce 15,000 suicides a year with guns?
No, I'm saying that if you go ahead and remove the guns, that the people who are intent to commit suicide are going to find some other way. I'm really sorry for anybody who decides that life is so miserable that they have to go ahead and take their own life. But I don't see where more gun restriction and more gun regulations, removing them from the hands of law-abiding citizens, is going to solve the problem, because if there's one thing that criminals love, it's to obey laws. And I can just see gangs and groups right now in the country who don't have those guns and shouldn't have them legally are suddenly going to show up at your local police station and say, "Oh, gee, I'm sorry, I'm in violation of the law. Here, let me turn mine in." It's not going to happen.
Dwayne,
if you want to
I'm asking for your ideas.
Why don't you stop the gun-free zones? Okay, most of these shootings and these crimes happen in gun-free zones around the country because the victims are sitting ducks. And the criminals know that their victims are going to be unarmed and they're going to be easy to take down.
Wow.
Try to find some criminal who's going to go on a shooting spree someplace here in Arizona. I'll tell you right now, it's not going to happen easily because we are an open carry state.
Ask Gabby Giffords, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Dwayne.
Okay,
please.
then as long as we're going to go ahead and ask Gabby Giffords, why don't we ask Gabby Giffords then how it is that one of Jared Loeffner's parents, who was a member of the Pima County Board of Supervisors, which has never been investigated, allegedly, from what was in the news, was using her influence to keep her son out of jail so he could pass a background check and get a gun, and he used it to go ahead and mow her down along with 6 other people.
Dwayne, you're ranting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you the facts. I'm sorry if you don't like the facts, but that's what happened.
No, I'm asking for your ideas. How do we reduce deaths and injuries?
I mean, we have an audience of people that are here that want to investigate practical, pragmatic solutions to this gigantic, fatal problem that we have. Like, would you agree that 30,000 gun deaths a year is a problem? Can we even start at the most basic thing? Because if you don't think it's a problem, then that's a problem.
Well, if it is a problem, and I agree that there are unnecessary gun deaths in the country that are a problem, but I don't see how you are going to create more gun regulations and more gun registration restricting the rights of law-abiding citizens to solve the problem. When has it ever worked? When has more gun control ever worked? Point out an area where gun control has ever worked.
There's a problem. Dwayne, I can't even, honestly, I don't think it's a particularly effective strategy right there to have less gun control. Is that what you're saying? Less regulation?
Sometimes the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I'm sorry, that's the fact. Our Second Amendment is not about using for hunting and just using them for self-defense.
It's also not about anarchy. Well-regulated militia. Do you know how many regulations there were put upon the militia at the time it was written? The Second Amendment is gun control. Are you kidding? I just can't with this. This puppeting of NRA nonsense is disturbing.
Yeah, Dwayne, I think you can...
I think your puppeting of nonsense, Colette, itself is also disturbing.
Okay.
Well, okay, I apologize for that. I think we can assume that we're both knowledgeable and we're all knowledgeable enough about this topic not to repeat the tired talking points on each side, okay? Dwayne, very little of what you've said is anything that we haven't heard before. It's a lot of NRA talking points, okay? We're trying to move past that. We're trying to look for common ground here, okay? So, you know, concealed carry is a reality in 49 out of 50 states, and it's about to become a reality in Illinois, okay? But again, that is not without gun regulation, okay? New York passed one of the strictest concealed carry laws in the country. Illinois is going to do the same. So what do we think is effective at reducing deaths and injuries from firearms? I think, you know, training, absolutely. Okay? I also think more restrictions on the ability to use whatever type of weapon, wherever you want to use it, can help reduce deaths and injuries. It's much different in a urban environment than it is in a rural environment. All these things have to be taken into consideration when crafting these regulations.
Okay, just two little questions here. Brad just joined, if everyone can see. We got you on video.
Oh, hi, Brad. I'm glad to see you made it.
Hi, Brad.
And
Finally, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. Sorry it took me so long to jump in. I guess there were some problems with the system. Max finally got it figured out, so I figured it out. So.
can I ask everyone that's on video, if you can occasionally glance down, we'll try to answer some of the questions that the silent participants are asking. I don't know what Lenny's technical glitch is, but I'm talking on some of the questions that are being asked, just like Tim is doing a great job moderating. You know, Brad, where we are really trying to come up and speak to solutions, not things that can be done that will improve gun safety, lessen gun deaths in this country. And Tim, I mean, I can answer it fairly shallowly just by saying that as I research and I become familiar with the nature of gun legislation in the country, besides my political feelings on it, this patchwork that we have of legislation that varies from city to city, from state to state. It's one thing in one state, it's completely different that borders it. It just seems like that's a setup for failure. It seems like that's, without any kind of a federal minimum, we are leaving thousands of people vulnerable every year, and thousands of people pay the price.
And I agree with that. Let me add to that idea that politically right now,
I'm not with any, I don't represent any coalition. I did get activated on gun control since Newtown. I'm married to a gun owner, Brad, so, you know, I'm not at all conflicted that regulation does not equal infringement. It just doesn't.
and I think all of us are in agreement with that idea. And I'd like to bring some specificity to the idea, you know, that one of the things that could start to bring this whole patchwork of regulations together across the country is a federal level requirement for a background check. And that seems to have some pretty broad support. And so, Brad, we'd be interested in your ideas on that.
CLU from basically deleting the people who are mentally ill and convicted criminals on it and stop them from in court because they're afraid that the rights of mentally ill and convicted criminals, that their privacy rights are violated, which is why they said that they don't want them on it. How do you stop them from that?
Well, Dwayne, through our political process, we try to balance all of the arguments and all of the rights across the entire country, and that's why we have a patchwork, because it's difficult to do that for 300 million people. Exactly what the background check requirement would be needs to go through the political sausage-making process and see what we can come up with. But the question for a discussion like this is, can we all agree that that would be something that would be effective in reducing deaths and injuries?
Okay, real quick, I'm just curious, what's everybody's understanding of the current background check process that gun owners go through? I mean, Tim, I don't know if you've ever purchased a firearm or anything of that nature, but I'm just kind of curious so I can get a basis to go off of here, so I don't, make, belittle you by any means.
Yeah, no. We're all, I think, pretty familiar with the current state of gun control and the arguments that have been going back and forth over the last several months. I've been involved in this issue for about 20 years, so rather than get into the details of exactly what a background check entails, the issue I think that we're saying is that there are firearm sales that can go through without a background check. And whether that's 40% or whatever number you want to pick, that's not the question. The question is, should there be a background check, requirement at the federal level on all firearm sales, so that more of these people who are getting guns that shouldn't would get caught.
Specifically speaking of private sales, correct?
You're asking me
that's what we're here. The talking
point. Agree to let a federal government conduct a background check on American citizens who can't even be truthful about what happened in Benghazi, or the fact that the Department of Justice has smuggled thousands of weapons into Mexico through the border in Arizona through straw man purchases that were paid for with our tax dollars.
So Dwayne, are you saying...
I like the laws that we have here in Arizona because the laws that we have here in Arizona is fairly tough. You guys are blaming the guns and not the criminals that are doing them. If you want to make the nation safer, how about tougher laws and tougher penalties for criminals who break the law, and this time we actually start throwing the book at them instead of letting them skate with a slap on the wrist?
I support that.
I mean, especially
I thought that you would. I agree.
With our current background check system, I think there needs to be a tighter background check. I'm a gunner. I own AR-15. I own handguns, Glocks. If you people would probably think I'm crazy if they see them, which firearms I own. But the thing with background checks is what's the number? I'm sure Dwayne could probably spout it off here. How many people attempted to purchase a firearm and fail a background check? It was 86,000 people that attempted, and I think there was maybe 300 people that actually got tried, and less than that actually got accused and were guilty. And I think there's an issue right there. If you're going to have that many people, who's to say that they're going to actually enforce any of these new laws that they're going to try to, put on the books in the first place? It's one of those things.
Let me ask a question though. When 40% of gun sales happen without a federal firearm licensed dealer involved, you're awfully close to 50% on those transactions. So let me ask you, I'm a lady who has bad intention. I want to get a gun. I'm not going to walk down to Bucky's gun shop when I can just go on Craigslist, tell the seller I probably wouldn't pass a background check, to be honest with you, and he'll sell it to me anyway. The truth is I would pass. I mean, I'm clean. But
in your state, Colette, can you actually have people selling weapons on Craigslist? Because they can't do that here in Arizona.
No.
Most of the country, they can. And, in fact, one way that they get around it, I'm not exactly sure on other townships and cities in New York, but if you go on New York Craigslist right now, there's a guy looking to trade his Jeep for whatever specific guns he was requesting. So it's a barter arrangement. And that's full-on legal.
Well, I know that I can't speak for New York. I know that here in Arizona, I have seen on different websites where people were willing to barter with weapons. However, they also, I have not seen a single ad yet within the state of Arizona for people that are to trade weapons or swap weapons for cars or something else where they haven't specified, if you can't pass a background check, I am not going to sell it to you, and the trade is off. You're going to have to prove to me. In fact, one of the best ways to do it in this state is just showing that you have a card for a CCW. If you've got a card for a CCW, then you're going to pass a background check, and you can go ahead and trade the weapon for whatever you want.
And how do you do that on the internet?
I think Arizona is probably one of the strictest states for this, which makes my point again. The reason that we do have the strictest state that we have as far as people being able to buy weapons in private is because we are an open and right to carry state. Because we are an open and right to carry state, a background check process is easy. The transactions between people, even private parties who do not want to actually give a weapon to someone who isn't responsible enough to handle it or couldn't pass a background check on their own, it is almost nil. In fact, to tell you the truth, the Fast and Furious operation that we had happen that was orchestrated by the federal government and buried under executive privilege is the first time that we have had that kind of straw man operation down here in Arizona that resulted in that many weapons disappearing at once.
Okay, well, there's a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, and again, okay, so Brad, you haven't had a chance to really chime in on the question. The question that we've been throwing out there is, you know, what are the areas of common ground that we can find and try to balance this argument between ideas to improve gun safety versus infringing on gun ownership rights?
I'm not for a ban. I'm not for, magazine capacity restriction. I'm not for any form of registration. I would like to see a little bit tighter of a background check system, not necessarily different than what we have now, but just more well regulated and a little bit more intensive on like the mental health issue. And I want to see some sort of safety or education program to go along with this, because I know in the state of Illinois, in my state here, to be a hunter, you have to go through a hunter's safety course or a hunter's education course, which it entails the whole thing of hunting from safe knife handling all the way down to safe firearm handling and things like that. And I think it's a good thing because, I took the course when I was 10 years old. I've been around guns since I was, too big to, too small to walk. And I've been taught the safe way to do it. I've been taught the right way to do it. And I think, from my experience, I used to, work behind the firearms counter. So I seen the people coming in to buy guns, and a lot of kids, in Illinois, to purchase a handgun, you have to be 21 years old. And I see a lot of these kids come in when they turn 21. It's like they're going to drink a beer and they're going to go buy a handgun, but they've never touched a gun in their life. And it's like, okay, dude, and it's not necessarily that they want to go out and kill somebody. They're buying this gun because it's like a glamorous thing. They want to be, fed life and and just be cool to say that they have a handgun. And then a lot of times it's either gets stolen by some of their buddies or they wind up hawking it somewhere.
Brad, I can agree with you completely, and I think that more education about guns needs to take place. This is one of the reasons
in terms of tightening up the background checks,
I am an NRA life member, is that here in Arizona, firearms safety and firearms training classes, and for Jenny right now who is asking what is a CCW, Jenny, a CCW is a concealed carry weapons permit. And most of the firearms safety classes throughout the country are administered by the NRA. And I wish that, to tell you the truth, I wish a lot of other states actually had the rules and regulations that we do down here in Arizona. But once again, I think that the reason that we have the firearms safety training availability that we do with your local police departments and through NRA outreach groups, which you can go into any gun store and apply for a safety training course and apply for a CCW, is because of the willingness of the state of Arizona to actually comply with the rules and regulations of which the NRA is administering, because we are a right to carry state.
Okay, so Brad, you mentioned that you were interested in tightening up the background check.
All my life. I've been around them since I was 5. I learned how to shoot when I was 8, and I've never had an accidental discharge of a weapon, nor would I ever give a weapon to someone who can't go out and get one of their own. If you can't come, buddy, don't even come looking for me. You're SOL.
Okay, Brad, you mentioned that you were interested in tightening up the background check system, and in particular the mental health aspects of that. I think that's something we all agree on. What about the idea of requiring a background check on every sale?
I'm not so keen on every sale. Like, I've never been a fan of gun shows, and as we all know, that's like the major, where it's changing hands without background checks. But some gun shows, there are federally licensed firearm dealers there, or federal firearms license dealers, FFL dealers, anyways, and they have to, by law, have to comply with, background checks. But it's the parking lot deal that everybody worries about. That, hey, buddy, I got this, I brought with me. It's like a swap meet for car parts, but with firearms. And I think there's an issue there. I'm not sure my feelings on it at the moment. But as far as like private sales, like I want to say probably 80% of the firearms that I own have been either inherited or handed down or gifted from either my father or my grandfather, both law enforcement people. Or uncle or somebody in my family, and I don't want to see that being imposed on, because as a gun owner, it's not really I own a gun and I go out and shoot it. It's not just the gun; it's a culture. It's a tradition. It's a family ties type thing, And if somebody were to tell me, "Oh, your deceased grandpa, you can't inherit this gun because your grandpa's deceased," and you're not, and now you're going to have to pay $50 to get the gun.
Yeah. I get you, Brad. And it's interesting because, we are exactly the representation of the urban gun issue and the rural gun issue. And we have to find a balance on how to reduce deaths and injuries in without infringing on each other's rights. So, if it was proven that more gun sales going through background checks would catch more prohibited buyers and reduce deaths and injuries, would you be open to some regulation on those private sales? Because I don't know how to craft laws to accommodate all of what you're talking about which is completely safe, is nowhere near the problem contributing to our deaths and injuries. But if we apply that same law in Chicago, it just opens up the floodgates, and we have all kinds of problems. So, how do we work together to find a compromise on that?
Can I interject something on this that I think is
Please.
really important to the conversation, and it gets overlooked a lot? Effective legislation is not made, in the hearts of grieving mobs. It's not made in courtrooms. It's not made at, political rallies. These are not the avenues to create effective legislation when it really comes down to it. However, we can model it on certain other things. We look at 30,000 deaths by gunshot in this country. To me, that's a problem. 30,000 dying of any one thing is a problem. How much of a problem? Leave it to you to decide. But I do know that when motor vehicle fatalities were looked at from a scientific perspective, not a political one, when you include DUIs and you see the progress that the MAD movement made on that, there are parallels. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm not getting into constitutional arguments here, but certainly regulation is not infringement. When 30,000 of our fellow citizens are dying, and a disproportionate number of those are women and children who are not gun owners, we have a big problem to solve. The Tier-Hart Amendment, to me, is one of the most nefarious pieces of legislation that exists in our country today. And if anyone is truly not being disingenuous in this, we have to admit that. It's a big mistake. We also need to look at things like mandated insurance. Gun owners of this country, like me and my husband, like you guys, and the gun manufacturers have an investment in the outcome of their product and an investment in the safety factor. The culture behind guns can change. We treat them.
So once again, we're going to blame the law-abiding gun owners, the gun manufacturers, and everyone but the criminal for the irresponsible use of a firearm.
No, Dwayne, Colette is simply stating the problem. She hasn't gotten to any specific recommendations yet on solutions. Please continue.
Bear with me, Dwayne, because we've listened. We've listened to you quite patiently and respectfully. The NRA's influence on shutting down CDC on this research is a problem of epic proportions. The CDC does not have the resources or the research to effectively study the causes of gun violence and the outcome in this country. They don't have the funding because the NRA shut it down. They have hamstrung a federal agency. You will find...
That sucks. We're losing Cole
When
out
I
here.
say NRA, responsible gun ownership that they did. They stand for pure profit of the gun lobby, and that is it. And as a member, you are delusional if you think that your lifetime membership means a damn thing to them. It doesn't.
Oh, let me tell
When
you something
84%
about us
of
NRA members.
support that
There
people
isn't
have.
a single NRA member in this country, including myself, that wouldn't do whatever they could do, even if it meant risking our own lives as concealed weapons permit holders, to get between a criminal shooter and his victims any
That is
way
not the
we
issue.
can.
I don't care how
But no,
brave
the issue
you are.
is that the
That's
division
not the
that
issue.
we have in this
It's
country is
Walter
because
Mitty.
we have a gun culture
Hey,
of law-abiding gun
Walter
owners
Mitty.
who is basically has
Don't
nothing to do
legislate
with the
for Walter
criminals
Mitty.
in other parts of the country.
Okay. So, Colette, I understand that you listen to Dwayne and we're trying to have a conversation here, but it seems to be talking at each other, and we're not really making much progress in terms of finding the common ground. Let me just ask Colette if you're familiar with the whole argument about firearms as a public health issue, and I think it's the Haddon matrix that public health policy people use to solve things like deaths and injuries from cars, and they've used it effectively in the past. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not a social scientist, but I have done research on this, so I do know. I know that once the decision, and maybe it's legislated somewhere, but for a time, maybe it's still ongoing, every single motor vehicle accident that resulted in a fatality collects 120 data points. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's an example of the type of research that needs to be done to solve this problem. I think I agree with you 100% that we need to research this problem a whole lot more, and we are scratching the surface on solutions. We're trying, by trial and error.
I mean, we have studies by and for Congress, the Department of Justice, the Congressional Research Center, the Library of Congress.
And we don't have consensus. We don't have consensus. There's conflicting information. Okay, so a lot more research needs to be done before consensus can be reached and policies can be formed to reduce deaths and injuries and start to get this problem under control.
Well, there has been a lot of research.
There has been a lot, and we need a whole lot more.
There has been a lot of research. Studies by Congress, the Department of Justice, the Congressional Research Service, the Library of Congress, the National Academy of Sciences.
So, Dwayne, are you arguing that we've done enough?
Control and prevention have found no evidence that gun regulation stops and creates any less crime. None whatsoever.
Which gun regulations? What are you talking about? Are you seriously arguing that we shouldn't study it anymore?
No, I'm not seriously arguing that we shouldn't study it anymore. I'm saying that we can't go ahead and make up whatever statistics you want. Is that they have already studied this several times.
I agree. I think we all agree with that.
Originally with an investigation started in 1994 with the first assault weapons ban, and all these different agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control, have stated that there's never been proven that gun control reduces the rate of crime.
You understand the corollary.
We're not talking about crime. We're talking about deaths and injuries, okay?
Right.
We're talking about injuries from guns.
A problem in this country, and we need to come together and solve it. So please stop ranting.
The use of guns.
No.
The reason that the study was created was they looked into the crimes by the use of guns, and all these different agencies found out that there was no significant reduction in gun crime just because that gun control laws were enacted.
Okay.
So
let me ask
we can't enforce the ones that we have on the books right now. If we can't even enforce the ones that are on the books right now, how do you expect that piling an additional layer of regulations is going to make anything change?
Dwayne, does ranting on the NRA talking points make you feel good? Are you doing it?
Well, I'm sorry.
I think we've all heard it before. We're listening and we hear you.
Connecting between us, but sometimes when I go ahead and take a deep breath, it's the only way I can get a word in edgewise.
Wow.
Okay.
And now you guys are all frozen again, and I hear nothing.
Okay. So anyway, I'll take the opportunity then. I mean, Brad, props to you because you're just a calm, cool, collected, easygoing guy over there with your guns, and I appreciate that. I really do.
And so do I.
And you seem interested in the conversation without ideology, and I think there's a big difference. I've got skin in the game. You know what I mean? I've got a 4-year-old kid that I send off to school every day, so this is not an academic point for me. Newtown changed everything, and I think people need to understand that. And I don't care how long you've been an NRA Life member, the game has changed. This is my point as a member of a group that's working on common sense gun legislation. For Christ's sake, the NRA doesn't get to legislate my kids' future. I didn't elect them to a goddamn thing. They need to get out of my Congress, get out of my gun life. If I want them, I'll go find them. They don't get to legislate to me, and I'm sick of it. And I think you'll find millions hold it and let someone else answer, because I think it's in the spirit of fairness. I think we need to hear a lot of opinions here. They are the onion layers have been revealed on this group. They don't speak for me. They don't speak for you. Because the truth.
I will say, I'll respond to that. I'm a member of the NRA, not a life member because I can't afford it at this point. But I will say one thing about the NRA. Somebody has to control some of these liberal cracks that are out there that are trying to implement these laws. I mean, like in Illinois. I mean, Tim, are you from Chicago area?
Yes.
Amen.
Okay,
Thank you.
You got some of these guys out there that come up with these knee-jerk reactions to Sandy Hook that are like some of the most asinine things. You know, they come up with these bans that also ban a string
I
of
wish I
weapons
had a
that
clearer
use
connection where I could hear more of what you're saying. I really do.
on a daily basis. And
Brad, I get that you guys.
it's the NRA that's going to come up. They're not going to. They're going to lobby. Sure, they're going to dump a bunch of money into it. But I mean, you got to look at the guys like Michael Bloom or Mayor Bloomberg over there in New York. That's also dumping money into Illinois' elections that he shouldn't be having his hands into. Like with Robin Kerry that just got elected, and I'm sure it's part of Michael Bloomberg dumping $1.5 million, $2 million into her election fund.
Let me tell you something, Brad. The NRA has been doing exactly that at a municipal, state, and federal level for decades. So if you
and I think both of them are disgusting. I mean, campaign finance is another whole separate issue. But those are the rules of the game. That's how you play the game today. So
politics. I mean,
right. That's politics. Both sides have to play.
If the NRA is stronger, I mean, that's like saying my basketball team's better than yours, so you're going to hate that other, I mean, it's just the concept that, the NRA, 4 million, however many people they have, 4 million members of the NRA something can't be wrong here. I mean.
Well, there's a lot wrong. When 80 million people own guns, and 4 million, something like 3 million with a pulse, are speaking for 80 million who own guns and creating legislation.
And when 200 million would like to pass a background check and they're being thwarted by 4 million, that's not right.
Very wrong.
That's a political problem.
If we're thwarted by 4 million, can we at least stop the ACLU then from denying a background database include mentally ill people and convicted criminals? No one has answered that question yet. Why should those people be excluded? Why
those will be decided in the courts. Rule of law will decide that.
Exactly right.
We've been trying to have this for 20 years. They've been at this for 20 years. The American Civil Liberties has had thrown millions of dollars and countless lawyers into the courtrooms every time that the issue of gun control comes up, and their biggest complaint is that mentally ill people and convicted criminals have privacy rights as well, just as much as the rest of us do, and they don't want them included in the national database. And you know where I heard it again? I heard it again right after the tragic incident of Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook. And I'm like, you people have got to be insane. If we don't get the mentally ill people and criminals into a national database of people that should own guns, then what is the point of a national database?
I agree with Dwayne. There's too many. The thing with this country is, we're here today speaking about our ideas. What makes me happy and what makes you happy and what makes one person thinks right and the other person thinks wrong, somebody's going to hate it one way or the other. I can understand why, people don't want, their mentally handicapped or whatever, their mental illness being publicized in a national database, just like I don't want my gun being in a national database because, eventually.
My gun is in a national database.
For what?
I gave birth I had to register a baby within 3 days. Like, what are you people with this registration nonsense? If you own a house, Dwayne, you're in school. You're on a friggin' list.
Mm-hmm.
Get over it. Like, what is this nonsense about registration? The government.
But when you look at history, every
I'm sorry, Colette, you cut out again. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Every country that's registered a firearms taken them away. Canada.
That's simply not true. And then there's certainly nobody in this conversation who's interested in taking guns away. That is not what we're looking for. That is not what we're talking about.
She asked, what's the thing about the... I mean,
You can have a registration without taking people's guns away.
The Constitution,
My in-laws in
Dianne
Ireland.
Feinstein, Mario Cuomo, Commissioner Bloomberg, Representative Joe Salazar, that they're actually pushing right now for outright gun confiscation.
Who?
And you don't think there's radical ideas on the conservative side too? Do you think they have any chance of passing? Come on, that's not the issue.
It's a bell curve. We're right in the middle, you know, and where most people are. Probably 70 million people that own guns are right in the middle of the bell curve. This extreme on either side is ludicrous. You're self-marginalizing.
and I kind of want to know where it's getting their statistics on firearm owners. That's another problem in the United States. A lot of these statistics are skewed because we have no form of knowing who owns what guns. I mean, and how they were purchased. The only thing that
That's what you want, though, right, Brad? Like, you don't want anybody to know what.
I don't want them to know. I don't need Big Brother knowing what firearms I have. I think that's a point for abuse. There's no purpose for the government to come and take away your child, or there's no purpose for the government to come take away your house or your car. But the government could have a reason to come take away your firearm.
Let me tell you, in 14 years...
This is one of the reasons that I stood straight with Rand Paul, because Rand Paul just recently conducted a 13-hour filibuster against the rights of and the limits of power of the federal government. And most people don't even understand that he was actually defending all of the people. I don't care if you're Republican, liberal, or conservative, as to what rights the government has. And I don't even believe it actually got to this point where we're discussing the government having rights to kill Americans on American soil. When you actually have these conversations taking place, it becomes less and less a conspiracy theory, and more post everyone's mind, because you have got government officials like Kevin Yoder of the FBI saying that they haven't decided yet whether the government has the right to kill Americans on American soil.
It's not a conversation.
Frankly, I think that our Second Amendment and our Constitution was not about hunting. It was about ourselves from the overreaching power of a federal government that decided that it could make subjects out of its citizens.
Okay, guys. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? Okay?
Well, if we're going to do anything about it, let's start at the local level. And if you know somebody who is mentally ill that shouldn't have a handgun, encourage them to get help. At your state and local level, I think the states are much better at handling this issue than the federal government is. Petition in your state to actually get outpatient care for mentally ill people. These things don't happen to random people. They happen to friends and neighbors and people we know, and almost everyone knows a family or has a friend that has been a victim of gun violence and has been a victim of criminal violence, period. We can't just hand this off to some federal bureaucracy and say, okay, there, I just did my part and it's done. And if you know somebody who is mentally ill that does have problems, make sure that you know that that person knows that you're going to be around and help them through a difficult situation. Take them out to breakfast. Find out what's going on in their life. And if you know somebody that's got some serious problems, that maybe has guns that probably may do harm to himself and others, it would usually be to a friend and family member first. Like, I would put myself in this issue. Maybe it's about time you actually let me take control of those for you, for your own safety's sake at this point. I think that we expect too much out of our federal government, and we're too willing to go ahead and pass off the responsibility to them as well, when communities are better at organizing this than the federal government is.
Dwayne, I think you're exactly right, that it regardless of what we talk about with legislation and public policy, this problem isn't going to get significantly changed until the culture changes. And so right now, I agree with you 100% that we, most communities have a very hard time dealing with mental illness. And there needs to be a whole lot more information out there and education about doing exactly what you just said. How do you even identify your friends and neighbors that have these problems? And if they have guns, I mean, what should we do?
Would start by, if they seem to have a desire to want to hurt themselves or others, that would be a good place to me to start asking questions.
This social, cultural change that absolutely is part and parcel of the movement at a larger scale, there are a lot of things that we can do, and I agree with you. I don't think it all has to come from federal or state legislation. I think some of it is us. Some of it is actual gun owners looking at our friends and neighbors and saying, hey, dummy, lock the gun up. Some of it is saying, hey, pal, you just lost your job. You're drinking a little too much. Let me hold your guns until shit calms down. Let me do that. Let me help you. There's no government threat. There's no implied loss of Second Amendment rights. It's just one gun owner to another saying, let me help. Now, I go on Facebook and I see pictures of toddlers sucking on the business end of a .38, and there are 15 comments under it that say, hey, start them young, good job. That infuriates me. Where is the outrage among responsible gun owners saying, dude, you're an asshole?
Well, if someone actually has their toddler sucking on the barrel of a .38, that's really stupid. I mean, I'm sorry. I had kids myself, and I'd never let them do that.
Well, no, of course not.
The point, Dwayne, is that our culture does allow that, okay, today.
Our culture applauds that. Now, the other issue is the very people who could have a direct, sustained impact on that, the physicians and the pediatricians of this country, are also hamstrung from asking about gun ownership in the home because of delusional friggin' fantasies that means the government's going to come get my guns and it's none of their business. My pediatrician asked me the first time I brought my newborn son to his office if we did have guns around. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't incriminating. He's more pissed that I smoke than that we own a gun. He knew by asking the question I was going to think about it with a newborn in my house. And he should be able to ask that every time I visit. For the safety of my child, who no one else can take care of, who cannot vote, who cannot speak for himself. This hamstringing of physicians is deliberate nonsense. They should be able, and the pediatricians are the ones who will tell you the damage they see every day from accidental discharges and toddlers wandering in and finding a pink pistol. For God's sake, what have we come to, that the doctor can't even ask about it? That infuriates me.
Well, if that's a problem in your home, then you actually have problems with parents who can't lock up those guns and keep them out of reach of their own kids.
But how many of
them? Of course we do.
I have kids of my own. When I actually taught my son how to shoot, we went out with his .22 rifle. I taught him how to use it, and we locked it up and put it away once we got home.
Dwayne, we're not talking about you as an individual. We're talking about our communities. We're talking about a community problem. There are parenting problems. I mean,
I'm responding to Colette.
Dwayne, check it out. Look at this, right? John Deere, I'm a friggin' gun-owning family. Do you understand me? It's not about guns or no guns. It's about less dying.
I think everybody, wants their kids safe, and I think the real issue behind gun violence in the United States there's going to be accidents if you have a dangerous piece of equipment.
Absolutely. But I mean, if you've got kids that are finding guns in your home, that's not the responsibility of a failed legislation. That's the responsibility of a failed parent controlling the home. I'm sorry, Brad. Go ahead. You guys keep. I have a really poor connection here.
Sure. The thing is that there's going to be. We can't avoid accidents. I mean, we can try to lessen them, and I think through education, that would be a huge deal. Because, like I said before, I see the people that buy the guns, and half the people I wouldn't want to be around, only because they just they don't know that they don't know. I mean, you would think it's common. To me, it's common sense how to handle a firearm, but some of these people just don't get it. And I think with education, just like with the CCW, like the Dwayne CCW thing. Every state that issues a license, you have to do some sort of safety course, and these people, elderly women and men, and people that have never been around law enforcement type training for firearm safety, really learn some safe handling tips. But my biggest thing here, if we really want to tackle the gun violence in America, we really got to start looking at the gang violence, guys. I mean, Tim, you're from Chicago. You said I caught a little clip there at the beginning of the talk that you're with something with handgun violence or something like that. I'm not sure. I just caught a little bit of that. But we know that the gang, if we can figure out how to reduce gang violence in the country, I think we're really going to impact on the amount of deaths that are coming from a firearm. I mean, you look at all these kids that are getting. And there's one reason, and it's poverty, and it's I need to steal or I need to sell drugs, and I've got this lifestyle that I think is awesome that's going to get me rich, but inevitably you're going to end up either getting yourself killed or you're going to kill somebody else.
And Brad, also in that, you've got people who grow up around that who are not dealing drugs, who feel they need a gun. I mean, kids, 14, 15, to protect themselves from that. So it is a huge issue, and Tim's coalition is all about handgun violence. But I would issue a word of warning that the gun death problem that we have in this country really is not the exclusive purview of gangbangers.
Oh no, I agree. But if you look at the gun numbers,
thousands of little tots are dying every day. They're not in gangs. You know what I'm saying?
I know, but when you have a gun violence rate of 300,000 in country, 6,000 is a pretty small number. I mean, not to be cold-hearted or selfish or anything, but 6,000 is a pretty small number compared to 300,000.
One other consumer product that has 6,000 deaths a year, where we don't try to figure out what's wrong. Show me a
malpractice.
6,000 people that wouldn't be pulled off the
malpractice. I mean, I guess you can malpractice. I guess if you can consider a doctor.
Let's also look at some of the 6,000 deaths a year too, and realize that a lot of the deaths that they're taking into these statistics from handgun violence are law-abiding citizens use handguns in the self-defense of their home and their families. That's more than 2/3 of them.
How many a year, Dwayne? Just to get an idea of how delusional you are on that number.
62.3% of all the handgun deaths in this country were because in the last 20 years have been of people actually protecting their business, their life, their limb, or their property with a firearm.
Tim, and I don't.
Well, you can argue me with if you want to, but I'm actually using Department of Statistics.
I would like a link for that because I just don't buy it, Dwayne. It's absurd. Just don't buy it, and I can't respond appropriately other than asking for a link to that.
I just said Department of Justice. Go ahead and look it up yourself.
You won't find it. Okay?
Yeah, I didn't think so.
It's not. That's not a specific enough citing, Dwayne, and I'm going to chime in on that. That's a ridiculous number.
Thank you.
So if you have a specific citing on that, please share it.
I think to constantly seek ways to look at this as not a problem is a problem.
I'm not constantly looking at ways to see this as not a problem. I'm just trying to tell you right now that I really don't appreciate your effort to add additional weight to the scale.
Nobody's trying to add weight to the scale. We're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to have a conversation, okay? And nobody's trying to get your guns. And nobody's interested in winning a scoreboard tally of how many gun laws we can pass.
Right.
Nobody's interested in that, Dwayne.
We have a legislative problem. We have a political problem. We have a safety problem. We have definitely a research and research funding problem. We most definitely have a dying problem. What we don't have are solutions that work toward it. What we don't have are best practices that are universal, federally mandated, absolutely with teeth for those that would not stick to the mandated minimum. For God's sake, let doctors ask. Let the CDC research. Every single gun fatality in this country should be collecting 100 or more data points. Point of sale. Where did the gun come from? Was it a gun malfunction? A lady last week in friggin' McDonald's sat down with her, her piece and shot her husband in the leg. Concealed carry holder, open carry, whatever state it was in, shot her husband in the leg. He'll be fine, and it's a big oops. But I'll tell you what, if it was my kid sitting next to you eating his Happy Meal and you shot him by accident, what's my recourse? How is that okay? It's not okay. And it's a matter of God's grace that she only hit her husband and only hit him in the leg. And I'm sorry, but I cannot go out into this world of 300 million guns and pray that all of you are careful today. I will not do it.
Well, it sounds to me like that woman that accidentally shot her husband didn't know about enough what she was doing with the weapon in the first place to handle it properly.
Well, you tell her that, because the story was widely covered, Dwayne, and it's not the only one that happened last week. Actually, there were 2 fast food restaurant accidents.
Well, then how did that happen?
How did it happen? Let's get the CDC in and figure it out. That's a really good point. Let's get them money that they need and get the NRA the hell out of the CDC.
Why don't you just go ahead and ask the woman herself directly? How did you accidentally shoot yourself in your husband in the leg? I can tell you right now, the only accidental discharge that I have ever had in my household was when I was loading my motorhome, and I went ahead and I handed my double-barrel shotgun to my stepmother and told her to be careful with it. She threw it into the bed with little regard as to whether it was loaded or not, and blew a hole through the side of my motorhome. Thank God she didn't kill anybody with it.
There are known defects between the gun safeties and triggers, the holsters that they catch in. It happens every day. And there are certain makes of gun, if you go and spend some time, I'm sure you have, in different manufacturer forums where people are talking about their guns, there's all kinds of conversation about, that kind of thing happens a lot with that model. Show me one other product that has histories of defective issues like that we don't get in there as a country and say, we got to fix that. My baby's crib killed 3 people in 1 year. They sent me a fix-it pack to make the sides immobile because 3 kids died. Why aren't we doing this with guns? When people are dropping dead from mishandling, misuse. When the gun owners are invested in the outcome of these products, the whole world of gun safety will change. PLCAA is probably to blame for a lot more deaths than we can even quantify right now in this country. It is a bad law. It is a bad immunity for an industry that has deathly consequences. That's the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, if anyone is wondering what my acronym is. It is a really bad law. And when the gun makers are exposed to tort liability for the outcome of their product, I am not talking about the idiot who leaves it in the couch cushions. I am talking about...
Was that 2000?
Yes.
Was that 2005?
Yeah, that's right.
What were the arguments for passing that? I don't remember.
Well, I wasn't involved, in this movement at the time. I assure you it was about money and votes. I assure you of that. But what you can more or less figure out is that the gun makers don't want to be exposed to the negligence of the end user, which I agree with, by the way. If I use my car in a faulty manner, I can't go sue Ford. However, when my particular make and model of car has a tendency to like blow up if you put, gas in it, then they're not protected from tort liability. Why should the gun maker be? There are guns floating around this country that have a habit of storing a round in a chamber without giving you any visual warning of that. In fact, this was one of the cases brought. So I can point my gun goofing around, at my friend and boom, blow his head off because there's no visual indicator that there's a chamber. There's a round in the chamber. And that's like a bad design flaw, wouldn't you say?
That's kind of like gun ownership 101. Always.
Yes, Brad, I agree with you. However, knowing that the product that you are producing has a tendency to be used by not the brightest people sometimes puts the onus on the manufacturer to kind of, when I go to open my kids' vitamins, there's 85 calories on that friggin' bottle. I can't even open the stupid jar without asking my husband. I think we should make it a little more commonplace to prevent stupid. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying legislate that, but when there's a design flaw, that is something that the gun maker should be held accountable for. And you can see thousands of cases of that if you just look at some online forums. There are gun makes and models that are known to be hazardous, that have a tendency to like AD when you drop them. That shouldn't happen. When the gun makers are exposed to liability for these things, they're going to get real interested in consumer safety. I guarantee.
I'm kind of curious as to, a forum is kind of a bad place to gather your information from.
But it's not. It's not my only source of information. Would you agree or disagree? There's no other industry that enjoys that protection. None.
No, I agree, but I want to, personally, all the gun malfunctions that I've ever experienced, usually a jam shell, never have I ever once had a firearm just go off.
You also grew up with guns.
I haven't either.
You know what you're doing. You were trained and you take it very seriously.
You gotta pull that trigger for that to get in the fire. I've never, ever once had
Neither have I. Neither have I, and neither have most people. Most people have not experienced an AED. The ones that have, most of them can walk away and laugh and say, "Holy shit, that was stupid." However, there's a significant number of people who don't get to walk away, and there's a problem.
From accidental discharge, I want to see the numbers of accidental discharge death.
That'd be great. And we could see those numbers because the gun makers would get those numbers if there was a chance they were going to be sued. You see the hamster logic that goes on here?
No, I guess I don't see it because I've never known a gun to just start shooting all on its own. If a gun is going to actually be owned by the owner and the owner is blaming the gun for an accidental discharge because he dropped it, how is that the manufacturer's fault? A gun is a dangerous instrument. You've got to know what you're doing.
Wait, you just told us a story that somebody blew a hole in your camper.
Yeah, because I handed a shotgun to my mother-in-law who threw it across the room onto the bed. If I'd known she was going to do that with it, I would have told her to stop helping me and get out of my house a long time ago. After that, I'm like, that's it, no more. I thought you had more common sense than that, and clearly she didn't.
She killed you.
And she's lucky she didn't get any of us killed.
Damn straight. What if she did? Wouldn't you?
After that, no, you're not touching my guns ever again.
But it's not about your guns, Lane. It's not about your damn guns. It's not.
Did I just lose all you guys?
Your anecdotes. Oh. It's not about that. There are thousands of kids who are getting killed from this. If you look at, thousands and thousands over time, the gun industry has no investment in the outcome in this product. If they did, they would be looking at biometrics. They would be looking at RFID technology, which is out there and can be researched. There are 2 patents in Europe for this crap. How are we not the leading country on gun safety mechanisms using really advanced technology? How are we not the country leading that?
We're not the leading country on gun safety, typically because of liberal policies.
Like the T-Hurt Amendment? All right.
Gun safety, trigger smart locks, RFID, all of it. It's the year 2013. We're working on 200-year-old technology. Why is that? Because the gun makers aren't invested in safety. They're invested in the sale.
All right. I have to get off now. You guys can continue talking, but I've got to go.
Nice speaking with you, Tim.
Good speaking to you, too.
Meet you.
Colette, thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Wayne, goodbye.
Again, hopefully without...
Okay, goodbye, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Brad, does it look like it's down to me and you?
Seems so.